Over 2,000 years ago, a man described our world with frightening precision. He described a society addicted to entertainment, a civilization that elected charismatic liars over wise leaders, a culture where comfort replaced truth, popularity replaced virtue, and the loudest voice was trusted more than the most knowledgeable one. He described influencers, political spin doctors, outrage media, and echo chambers, without ever knowing any of those things existed. His name was Plato. He's been dead for 2,400 years. So why does every warning he wrote feel like it was published yesterday? Why does a man who died before electricity, before the printing press, why does he understand our world better than most of our living politicians? That's what we're getting into today, and I promise, by the end, you're going to look at your phone, your news feed, and your own habits very differently. Let me give you 30 seconds on Plato, because ancient Greek philosopher sounds irrelevant, and I want you to understand why it's actually the opposite. Plato was born around 428 BC in Athens, a city running one of history's most ambitious social experiments, democracy. Citizens voted. Citizens debated. Citizens chose their leaders. It was radical. It was also, Plato came to believe, deeply dangerous in the wrong conditions. Plato was the student of Socrates, and Socrates, the wisest man in Athens, was sentenced to death by a democratic vote. The crowd, manipulated by politicians and fear, executed a man for the crime of making people think too hard. We built an attention economy that rewards the sophist skill set, emotional manipulation, confident delivery, tribal signaling, and punishes the philosophical one. Nuance, uncertainty, and the willingness to say, I don't know. Plato saw it coming 2,500 years ago. Plato didn't write the Republic to depress people. He wrote it because understanding the mechanism of collapse gives you a fighting chance of reversing it. So here's what I take from all of this. Question your shadows. Whatever you believe most confidently, especially if it perfectly confirms your worldview, investigate it. That act of genuine questioning is the only thing separating a free mind from a cave prisoner. Stop rewarding sophists. Every time you click outrage content you know is manipulative, every time you share something because it feels good rather than because it's true, you're paying someone to make the world more confused. And notice who tells you to stop thinking. The people who benefit most from a distracted, emotional public always call critical thinking elitist and nuance weakness. Pay attention to who that serves. Plato couldn't have known about smartphones or algorithms, but he understood something deeper than any technology: human nature itself. What happens when comfort beats truth, when charisma replaces competence, when a society stops asking hard questions and starts rewarding easy answers? 2,400 years later, we have more information at our fingertips than any civilization in history. We also have sophists on every platform, shadows on every screen, and ships steered by people very good at telling us what we want to hear. He saw it coming. He wrote it down. He left us the map. The question is whether we're willing to look at it. Drop in the comments. What's one thing from this video that actually shifted something for you? Not what you already believed. Something that moved. If this is the kind of thinking you want more of, subscribe. We're just getting started. Plato watched that happen. It broke something in him that never healed. From that moment, one obsession consumed him. What corrupts a society from the inside? What turns good citizens into bad ones? What destroys a free civilization before anyone notices? He wrote it all down, and it maps almost perfectly onto right now. The most famous thing Plato ever wrote is the allegory of the cave. You've probably heard of it. But most people know the surface and completely miss the devastating point underneath. People are chained inside a cave their entire lives, facing a wall. Behind them, a fire casts shadows of objects onto that wall. The prisoners have never seen anything else. So to them, the shadows are reality. One prisoner breaks free. He stumbles out into actual sunlight. It's blinding, painful, but his eyes adjust. He sees the real world for the first time and understands. Everything he believed was a cheap imitation of reality. So he goes back into the cave to tell the others, and they try to kill him, because his truth threatens their comfort, because they'd rather stay chained than accept they've been living a lie. Here's what people miss. Plato wasn't just telling a story about knowledge. He was warning about the structure of society. The shadows are what we now call media. Curated, filtered, distorted reality projected for mass consumption. The cave is the cultural bubble we're born into, the one we never question because we've never seen outside it. Replace the cave with a smartphone. Replace the shadows with an algorithm built to keep you engaged, not informed. The allegory snaps into perfect, terrifying focus. We are the prisoners, and most of us are voluntarily comfortable with our chains. Plato had a second allegory. He called it the ship of fools, a ship at sea. The sailors argue constantly about who should steer. None have studied navigation, but they're all loudly confident. Meanwhile, the one person who actually understands navigation gets dismissed as impractical. Nobody wants him at the helm because what he says is complicated and doesn't feel good. The sailors take turns steering based on who's best at manipulating the crew, not who's most competent, who's most persuasive. The ship drifts. Think about the last election you followed. Were candidates chosen based on competence, knowledge of economics, public health, foreign policy, or charisma, entertainment value, and who could land the sharpest insult on a debate stage? Plato's point wasn't that democracy is bad. It was that democracy without educated citizens is a ship without a navigator. And in that ship, the most dangerous person isn't the one who steers badly. It's the one who's so entertaining while steering badly that nobody notices the rocks ahead. We built an ecosystem that punishes nuance and rewards performance. Then we act surprised when the ship drifts. Plato wasn't surprised. He predicted it precisely. This is the part I find most chilling, because this isn't abstract philosophy. This is a psychological profile, and it fits. In the Republic, Plato describes how tyranny doesn't begin with the tyrant. It begins with the people. He describes the democratic man, someone raised without real values, who treats all desires as equally valid, told that freedom means no limits on yourself, not evil, just empty. And in that emptiness, he becomes vulnerable. When freedom starts to feel like meaninglessness, he reaches for a strong voice, a leader who speaks with certainty, identifies enemies, and offers belonging in exchange for compliance. The tyrant always begins as a champion of the people, bold, transgressive, entertaining. He attacks the elites. He says what others won't. Then, slowly, he consolidates. He attacks institutions that check his power. He silences opposition gradually. He surrounds himself with loyalists over competent advisors. He manufactures enemies to keep the crowd afraid. Read that again. Tell me it doesn't sound familiar. Plato wrote this in 380 BC. In Plato's Athens, there were professional speakers called sophists, not philosophers. Philosophers cared about truth. Sophists cared about winning for whoever paid them. Brilliant, eloquent, completely indifferent to whether what they said was actually true. Plato despised them, not because they told obvious lies, but because they created a world where nobody could tell truth from sophisticated-sounding nonsense. They didn't make people believe false things so much as they made people exhausted by even trying to find what was true. An exhausted, cynical public gives up on truth being knowable. And that public will follow whoever speaks with the most confidence. Does that sound like your newsfeed? Where the most viral opinion is rarely the most accurate, but always the most emotionally charged?